Okay, Shalom Aleichem Rabotai. Today we're going to learn about the topic of Nushaot Tefillah. I think some of you asked regarding this inyan about the particulars when we follow a Nusach in the Sidur. Are we allowed to change some of the Nuschaot in the Sidurim? Are we allowed to tamper with that? Do we? Is that part of Minhagim of Al Titosh Torati Mecha? Of course, this is a question that's relevant also if somebody doesn't want to pray Nusach Sfaradi, he wants to pray Nusach Ashkenaz. He's with Ashkenazim and he wants to switch to Nusach Ashkenaz, or somebody who's Ashkenazi wants to switch to Sfaradi, or if somebody's Hasidic, he wants to go back to Ashkenaz. So all of these questions come to light, and they are. It's a sugya that doesn't necessarily have a bet av in halacha. It's not necessarily something that is so explicit. There's a famous Maruchu, Rav Chaim Vital, in the name of the Arizal, in Priyatz Chaim Shar Tefillah. And this Priyatz Chaim writes the following: B'shorshe ha-minhagim, in the root of the minhagim, that there's chilukim between the Ashkenazim, between the Sfaradim, Katlonia, Italia, v'kayotze bazeh. So he really splits it. You notice there's not only two camps, Sfaradim and Ashkenazim. There's also Italy. I have friends who pray Nusach Roma. It's different than what we have. There's certain chilukim. Sheyesh be'em minagim kadmonim lahem besidurei atfilam. Haya omer mori, zichrono livracha. My Rav would say, Sheyesh yud bet she'arim barakia, neged yud bet shevatim. There are 12 gates in the sky, keneged the 12 shevatim. V'chol echad olet tfilato derech sha'ar echad. And each one, his tefillah goes up through a different gate. V'hem she'arim haniskarim b'shirhi sefer Yecheskel. And these are the she'arim that are mentioned in Sefer Yecheskel. And these are all she'arim that are equal. So, and he writes the following: Lachen kol echad ve'echad ra'ui le'achzik b'minhag tefilato. Each person should keep the minhag of his tefillah. Ki mi yodea im hu meshevet ahu ve'en tefilato el yadea sharahu. So, who knows if he's from a different shevet, if he doesn't follow that his tefillah is going to go up. But if it's halachot that are mefurash in the Talmud, that's equal. So there are different nuschaot tefillah from different shvatim, and each one should go according to his minhag. That's pretty clear in the words of the Arizal. Number one, you see that if a person is from a certain shevet, maybe from a nusach from another shevet is not going to go for him because that's not his shoresh neshama. Number two, the Nusach HaTfilah of Katlonia, Italia, is considered she'arim. And just like there's a difference in she'arim, there's also a difference in tefillot for every single Eda. And number three, things that are explicit in the Gemara is equal for all the Shvatim, and one shouldn't change them. So these are the three things you see from the Arizal. And the Sefer Mishnat Chasidim, which was from the Bet Midrasho Shel Arizal, writes, every single chiluk minagim comes from a different shoresh of a haneshama that a person has. Now, when the Arizal writes that now, he also adds on the Mishnat Chasidim that if he doesn't know the minag that his parents did, it's good that he should go according to the marchu, because which is mostly the tefillot of the Sfaradim, because that's gonna be kolel everything. Okay. So the question is like this: where do we find a makor that you could change nuscha tefillat, or you shouldn't change nuscha tefillat? In the Bavli, it's not written anywhere about changing the girsaot or nuschot tefillah. There's Yerushalmi in Masechet Eruvin, Perek Gimel Halacha Tet, that says the following: Af al pi sheshalachnu lachem seder mu'adot, al teshanu miminage avotechem. That even though we send you the seder of the mu'adim, don't change from the negavotem. Now, there are those who have the girsa, the Korban Eda brings, that there are those who have the girsa, Af al pi shekatvu lachem seder tfilat mu'adim, al teshanu miminage atfilot shenagu avotechem. So here you have a makor in the Yerushalmi already on tefillot, that there's a difference in the Nusach, and the Magen Avram in the beginning of Siman Yud Ched brings this girsa. And Rav Moshe Feinstein in Shelot Utshuvot Igrot Moshe asks, there's a famous Igrot Moshe Chelik Bet of Orach Chaim Siman Chav Bet that was asked, how is it the Hasidim switched? Do you guys hear me? I'll just go over to what I was saying beforehand, that the Igrot Moshe is the famous teshuvah that he was asked about somebody who was originally Ashkenaz, and then he did Nusach Sfarad, and he wants to go back to Nusach Ashkenaz. So the question is he allowed to go back to Nusach Ashkenaz? And on that, Rav Moshe Feinstein, he brings the Girsa of the Yerushalmi, that the Girsa of the Yerushalmi says that you shouldn't change Nusach HaTfilot. So Rav Moshe Feinstein says, he asks, how is it that the Ashkenazim, do you guys hear me?
Ashkenazim, do you guys hear me?
Yeah, now we hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to mute you because I have an echo with you. So Rav Moshe Feinstein asked, how is it possible that that they switched from Nusach Sfarad to Ashkenaz, Nusach Ashkenaz to Sfarad? How did the Hasidim do that in the first place? How did it's mefurish in the Yerushalmi? So number one, it's dependent upon the Girsaot. Number two, it's dependent upon that if there was a tzorich, they felt there was a tzorich. There's a lot of different achronim who ask and who discuss this question. How was it that Nusach Ashkenaz in the first place was able to switch to Nusach Sfard? And the Sholu Meshiv, one of the Gdolei Ador from Poland, in Taltia, with the third Chelik Siman Remez, writes that he brings a Marshdam. There's a very famous Marshdam, which was one of the Kadmonim, or Chaim Siman Lamed Hey, that writes that, and he writes the following. Listen closely to the Lashon. Af al gav sheyesh inyanim she'adavar hagon ונראה טוב לאחוז האדם במנהגי אבותיו, וקרוב הוא שנכנסה בזעזרת בל תיטוש תורת אמך, מכל מקום בכי אגב בעניין זה טוב יפה להניח המנהג ההוא לאחוז בסדר מנהג ספרד. Says the Marshdam the following: even though it's good to follow the minhagim of your forefathers, and it's close to be in the Azara of Bal Titosh. Nevertheless, regarding switching to Minhag Sfarad, let's say you were from Italian, you want to go to Sfarad, that you're allowed. The Marshdam wasn't Hasidish. He was from the Kadmonim beforehand. So he said that you're allowed Al Kol Panim to switch from Italy to Sfarad. So the Sholom Meshiv has a problem with this Marshdam. He says, what does that mean? Why are you allowed to switch? It's before the Yerushalmi that you're not allowed. So the Marshag, one of the Talmidim of the from the Khatam Sofer and Chelik Bet Siman Samech Zayin, says that it could be that the Yerushalmi is not a real Isur. It was just saying an Inyan not to. These, number two, these Shinuyim are not according to Halacha, they're from Minhag, and it could be because Mipnei Machloket, one shouldn't change. And since it's only mipnei machloket, then these shinuyim you would be allowed to switch. But it comes out that in Nusach Sfard they changed from Nusach Ashkenaz to Nusach Sfard. It seems to be the reason is because there wasn't a solid isur that you're allowed to change. It's an inyan nichnas libal titosh torat imecha, and they felt that they had enough reasons that according to the door or whatever that they're allowed, so they were totally allowed. Rav Moshe Feinstein says no. From the Yerushalmi, it's mamash asur, and not only that, somebody who switched to Sfarad, he had no right to do it in the first place because his original meaning was Ashkenaz, so he could go back to being Ashkenaz. That's what Rav Moshe Feinstein says. So you have a machloket between these Gdolei Olam, how serious it is to switch your Nusach HaTefilah. Is it mamash me'ikar adin or is it not? Either way, I think that it could be that the Pshat and the Marishdam, what does it mean? Is that there's a concept, besides of Al Yishanim Mipnei HaMachloket, there's a concept of Hotza'at Laz. I don't know if we spoke about this in this opportunity or we spoke about it some other time. Is that there's a din of Yohara, not to show off. And then there's another din of Hotza'at Laz ala Rishonim, showing that you're better than the Rishonim. And those two things are also Inyanim and Halacha. And we found them Smuchim and they are Isurim. So over here, if a person is going to switch a Nusach, he's going to say they didn't know what they were doing, there's a Hotza'at Laz. Now it gets complicated because if a person has to be Shaliach Tzibur, wants to be Shaliach Tzibur, there's no other Shaliach Tzibur, and they only want you to do Nusach Ashkenaz, so it could be he'd be allowed to be Chiyai Gavna because it's just a one time, it's not Hotza'at Laz. Now Rav Yaakov Hillel has a tshuva about this, V'yashev v'yam, Chelik Bet, and he says that the main difference between Nusach Sfarad and Ashkenaz is whether to say Hodu before Baruch She'amar or after Baruch She'amar. The rest is small stuff. The rest is small stuff. In other words, Sofa Tefillah also, the Ashkenazim do Aleinu earlier, and then the Shir Shal Yom, and we do Shir Shal Yom, and after Aleinu. Either way, says the Yashivam, if he's able, besides that specific Nusach, the rest a person could play around with be'akrai if he has to, if there's a tzorech that he's in a minyan and they want him to pray mipnei tzibur. He can't change the way he says Yud Kei Vav Kei, but the rest he's able to do. So it comes out like this. We've talked about changing, number one, the main Nusach HaTfilah, which is a huge discussion, and definitely a person doesn't have a right to change just like that. The question is it Medina or is it Miminhaga? And even then, Miminhaga, you have to have Gdolei Ador to change from Ashkenaz to Sfarad. Then you have a different subject, which is small Nuschaot Tfilah that you find within the Sidurim. There are Girsa'ot here, there are Girsa'ot there. There's problems with Digduk in this that you found. So are you allowed to switch? Are you allowed to change these issues in Digduk? I would think that all of this enters what the Marishdam says. Tov Adam lechos b'minhag avotav v'ikarav hu shenichnas be'azarat bal titosh torat imecha. In Minhagim, there's the halachot that are siyag and chumra. For example, if you are machmir not to eat kitniyot, so you accepted upon yourself this minhag lehachmir, Medina, you're not allowed to change. Medina, you violate Bal Titosh Torat Imecha Medina. It's Medin Neder, and it can't change. But then you have another subject, all these minagiat tfilot, who are like, we're not going to call them mitzvot aseh, but they're hanagot in the tfilah. There's no isser if you do it one way or the other, but there's a concept of Bal Titosh Torat Imecha. The way the Marashag says it, Al Tishanim B'pnei Machloket. The way I'm saying it is Hotza'at Laz, but there's still an inyan not to change. So the question is like this. When somebody opens up a Nusach, a Sidur Tefillah nowadays, we're not going to be able to go through all examples, I'm going to pick a few. When somebody opens up a Sidur Tefillah, they ask him, what Sidur do you pray in? He says, Nusach Sfaradim. What does that mean, the Sfaradim? There's a Nusach of Edut HaMizrach, which is Bavel, Paras, a lot of Chalab by the Syrians. And then there's the Nusach Sfaradim that were basically influenced by the Sidurim of Livorno, Leghorn in Italy. More specifically, the Sidur Tefilat HaChodesh that the Chida looked over, and that was the Sidur that was mitpashet in most Sephardic countries, including Morocco. There was also other Sidurim that had influence, like the Bet Oved, which is close to the Sidur Livorno, from Rav Yehuda Shmuel Ashkenazi, who the Chida writes on him, Dvarav Divrei Elokim Chaim. He wrote a lot of halachot there also, that a lot of halachot we follow that are written in the Bet Oved. We're definitely mushpa from the Bet Oved. Then there was the Sidur Chukat Olam, a little bit less matzui, but it's mostly Tfilat HaChodesh, and even in the Tfilat HaChodesh there were different editions. So if you open up Tfilat HaChodesh, you'll see there are things that we still don't do nowadays. There's a Sidur that was commonly used in my days that we grew up with called the Patach Eliyahu. Patach Eliyahu is basically a replica of the Tfilat HaChodesh, just a nicer writing and instructions. There are many things in the Patach Eliyahu that we don't do nowadays. So let me give you a few examples. Because in the Nuschaot Atfilah, it's a little bit of evolution that happened. There are certain minagim that over time changed and they became Nachalat HaKlal. And it's very hard to decide which things changed and we keep, and when things changed and they shouldn't have changed and we go back. It's very, very complicated. I avoid many times talking about Nuschaot Tefillah because of the lack of clarity over here. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Recently, somebody came to pray Shaliach Tzibur by us in Magen Avot, and they started reading from the Patach Eliyahu, the Tachanun. What's the Tachanun of Mondays and Thursdays? Right, the Nefilat Apayim is at the end, after Vehurachum. So he said, I'm following the Sidur, I've been doing this for 30, 40 years, and I felt bad. I told him, you're right, that was the original minhag, nobody does that now. Everybody does, based on the Arizal, which is a vidui, and then Nefilat Apayim, and then the rest, and then Kel Melech Yoshev and Shemuna, if it's Monday, Taman Numerot, if it's Thursday, and then we finish off Vehurachu. So I told him that's what we do over here. That's what we do over here. So it was hard for him to understand him. He grew up by Bate Knesset that the Rabbanim there were from Marrakesh, and they went with according to the original Nusach, which is also found in Tfilat HaChodesh. But b'mitziut, everybody changed nowadays. Why did everybody change? A lot of ashpah from the Arizal, from the Mikubalim over the generations, and it just became what everybody did. So to stick to something that is totally different, once it changed, to that degree it changed. The same thing is with the Nusach in Shmoneh Esrei, that there's a machloket whether to say by the bracha of Atachonen, De'a Bina Ve'askel, or Chochma Bina Vadat. There's no question that the original Nuschaot was De'a Bina Ve'askel. There's no question that was De'a Bina Ve'askel. Recently, I came across one of the pamphlets, one of the kuntresim of Yeshivat Ahavat Shalom from Rav Yaakov Hillel, the yeshiva of Rav Yaakov Hillel, and there they have Mekabtziel Gilyon 33 in the year Tavshin Samech Hey, which is actually the year Magen Avot came out, the first volume of Magen Avot, which is the year 2005, and there they printed the Hagaot from the Sidur of Rabbi Rafael Ibn Sur. That was niftar in Shnat. He was niftar in Shnat Taf Resh Ayin Zayin, not so long ago, about 100 and something years ago, from the city of Fez. And he writes a bunch of Hagaot in his Sidur. And I was very, very happy. I discovered this Tafshin Pei 2 years ago. I was very happy when I saw this. I was so excited when I saw this Ma'amar. I retyped it. I sent it to my typist to be retyped. And I wrote Hagaot all over it. And the reason why I was so inspired and excited is because here I saw that one of the Chachamim of Fez sat and, as we would say in our language, horved on all the Nuschaot and made Hagaot exactly what should be said and what shouldn't be said. And for example, by Chochma Dea Bina V'Yaskel, he writes, Tzarich Lomar Chochma Bina V'Da'at Kachi Girsata Arizal. So that means even in his days already, it was nitpashet to say Chochma Bina V'Da'at. And you still have the sticklers that kept on saying Dea Bina V'Yaskel, who insist that that's the minhag to say Dea Bina V'Yaskel. And if you want to switch it to Chochma Bina V'Da'at, they'll bite your head off and they'll say that was the original Nusach, and they are right. But many Behashpa'ata Arizal felt that they were allowed to change, kind of a micro version of the Ashkenazim that changed to Nusach Sfard, and they felt that they were allowed, and it became more and more common. Once it becomes more common, there's no more Al Teshanim Ibnei Machloket, there's no more Hotza'at Laza L'Rishonim. So what other inyanim are left? You're allowed to continue that Nusach HaTefilah. Next, there was another, there's the most contested Nusach, in my opinion, in Shmone Esrei, is Shover Oivim Umachnia Minim or Machnia Zedim. Ooh, this is a complicated subject. This subject is so sensitive, and you could learn so much from this subject, which is so obscure. I mean, we're talking about over here something, there's no Rashba, there's no Ran, there's no Shulchan Aruch, there's no Ramah, there's nothing for us. Like, how do we know what to do? So I'm going to tell you my back and forth on this, and that's the most that I can say. So in the Sidur of Rabbi Rafael Ibn Sur, he writes that the Nusach is Shover Avim Machnia Minim V'chen Ikar V'chen Hu Besidur Marach Kohen, was a very early Sidur Mitalmidei Rav Chaim Vital, V'chen Besidurei Ha'ari Bitfus Levov, the Sidur Ari that was printed Besidur Levov. Here you have Rabbi Rafael Ibn Sur putting his stamp that the Nusach should be Shover Oivim Umachnia Minim. The Gdolei HaPoskim spoke out against saying Shover Oivim Machnia Minim. If you take a look, the old Nuschaot of Edut HaMizrach from the Tfilat Yesharim, they are based more on Tfilat Yesharim, say Shover Oivim Machnia Minim as well. And if you take a look at the early sources, Gemara, the Rishonim, the Kadmonim, the Yerushalmi, Tosefta, it's all written over there, Zedim. So Rav Avadia Yosef has a teshuvah in Yechavedat, I believe, that the right Nusach is Shover V'Machnia Zedim, and you shouldn't write, and you shouldn't say Minim. And Lechora, he's right. I was very troubled with this in the time in Eretz Yisrael, what to do, because there's important ta'anot over here. And the makor to say Shover Avim Machnia Minim is from a Chida, that the Chida writes that this is what's written in the Sidur Marach HaKohen. Nechemdat Yamim writes this as well, to say Shover Oivim Umachnia Minim. And they say Rav Shmuel Vital maybe. It's very obscure sources, but the Chida writes it. So he says to say Minim. On the other hand, you have a wealth of Rishonim that say not that way. I was very confused. I went to Rav Elyashiv, and I asked Rav Elyashiv, Rebbe, what do I do? I have all of these sources that say Shover Avim Machnia Zedim, but my minhag is to say Minim. That was in our news. Look, he says it himself, Rav Ben Sur, the Iker is to say Minim. It's very mistaver that's what most said. I picked up last time I was in the city of Fez. My cousin lives there, and he let me take some of the sidurim from the Beit Knesset in Fez. I have an old sidur there. It wasn't even written where it was. It was one of the old Tfilat HaChodesh or one of those. It was written Minim. They said Minim. Some might have said Minim Zedim. I don't know if it's very hard to be kovea minagia tefilot in many times because it could be it's dependent upon what the Chazan had. But when you have like Rabbi Yefayli ben Sur and others telling you no, it's Minim because of the Chida, so I'm pretty confident that was the minhag to say Minim. So I asked, I said, Rebbe, what do I do? He said, and this is very dependent upon what we spoke about the Pri Chadash. He said very clearly. He said, even though you have all those sources, if your minhag has what to rely on the Chida, you do the Chida, and that's it. That's it. You do Shover V'Machnia Minim. And it struck me. It struck me. It's something that is. It is something very. It was something very. Very powerful because it's like it's against a lot of the sources. And Rabbi Yashiv, many times Yikov Adin et Tahar, he would just go according to straight halacha, and he was very machshiv the Nusach. I found out later that there's a place, there's a random sefer I found called Pnine Halacha or something that discusses a certain Nusach. I wish I had it over here. Beshuvcha Letzion Beshuv. I don't have the exact Nusach, and it's found to be that nowadays in Digduk, the old Nusach was clearly wrong. Rabbi Yashiv says you don't change the Nusach because Kfar Kitshuhu. The Nusach was already Mikudash. I wonder if that's a Rabbi Yashiv L'shitato a little bit, that once we say in Nusach it's Mikudash, it's not, you're right that there's mashmaut that might not have been the Nusach, but once it became Mikudash, it became Mikudash. Not only that, there's a ma'amar that was written, a long ma'amar from a certain Talmid Chacham, Rav Aronov, actually the same one that wrote against the Chemdat Yamim, and he proved from all types of research and study that there was no such thing as a Nusach of Minim. And when I wrote these He'arot, I sent them to my dear friend, very, very knowledgeable in Moroccan Minagim and in many other areas of the Torah, Rav Yosef Peretz from Panama, the son of Rav Michael Peretz. And he wrote to me, absolutely we should change to Zedim. And this is his reasoning. He's saying he first found out that this Sidur of Marach HaKohen, when he was in Lakewood, he went to the Syrian museum. Marach HaKohen was from Syria, and they had an original Ktav Yad, and that original Marach HaKohen, he says that somebody added on the Nusach of Minim, and it's probably the first one that said it was the Chemdat Yamim, and that's it. So therefore, there's not even a Makor, and he checked over 300 or something sources, and they all clearly, or 30 sources, I might be exaggerating, and they all say the same Zedim, nobody says Minim. And if that was the original source to say Zedim, somebody in Morocco changed it to Minim. So if somebody changed it to Minim, we have the right, now that we know that wasn't the original Nusach, to change it to Zedim once again. Kind of like Moshe Feinstein, what he said to change back the original source. And he says, therefore, if you want, you could also say the Nusach that is written in one of the Sidurei of their Rizal, you say both, Shover Aviv Machnia Zedim Minim. Now, I countered on this the following. I said, what's the reason why we say Shover Aviv Machnia Minim? Well, what's the big deal? There's a halacha that says that you have to do the pticha and the chatima, that the chatima has to be me'ena pticha. What's the pticha of Shover Aviv Machnia Minim? So our nusach was to say la minim ve la malshinim. If that was our nusach, so we should be Messiahim. The din is to be Messiahim me'ena pticha. What was the original nusach that said Shover Aviv Machnia Zedim? The original nusach, if you take a look at the Rambam, was la mishumadim al ti'eh tikva. If it was la mishumadim al ti'eh tikva, so anyways they changed it to la malshinim ve la minim. So if they changed it, why do I have to go according to their change? If they changed already, I'm also changed. In other words, Bishleim, if it's written like the time of the Chachamim, La Mushumadim, and then at the end, Shover Machnia Zedim, which is Me'ein Meshumadim, that's one thing. But it's written, they changed already the Me'ein Pticha. If they changed the Me'ein Pticha, I'm not Meshubed the Me'ein Chatima. And the Chatima I could do like what's written in Rav Chaim Vital. Now I don't really know what's the difference between Minim and Zedim? I never understood that, but these are things that are beyond me, and I never like to get involved in things, the hecher things, that you have students of the Arizal, apparently Rav Chaim Cohen, and the Archida writing that this was the original Nusach. I'm not going to mess and tamper with that. And afterwards Rav Shlomo Dayan also encouraged me very strongly that we don't change. We have a Masorah that we did Shover Machnia Minim. It's dangerous to start changing. So notwithstanding what my dear friend Rav Yosef Peretz wants to say that we should change it to Zedim, or at least say Shover Avim Machnia Zedim Minim, and he claims that in Marrakesh they never changed. Even though Chemdat Yamim was very popular there, they never changed. But I think that most people in Morocco, they did Minim. If you don't know the Minhag, that was the standard Minhag to say Minim. And that's what I do. I am not against somebody who changes it to Minim V'Zedim, because I understand where they're coming from. But it's something that, it's a very delicate subject. I have a psak from Rabbi Yashiv. I hope after in Shamayim that they're going to say, okay, you have a psak from Rabbi Yashiv. We can't blame you on what you did wrong on that one. And that is the topic of Shover Machnia Minim. So once again, just to give you an example, such sensitive things that it's so fine. What do we do exactly? Do we switch the Nusach based on what was written in different sources, but at the end of it, it's not like it was mafurish to tell me you have to say Minim. It was diukim, Zedim, because otherwise it's part of the Arizal that you can't change what's written in the Gemara. Now there was other things in Nuschot Tefillah that the Moroccans have that you think that they were just wrong, and it turns out that there's reasons for everything. I gave you a few examples a few weeks ago, if you remember. One of them is that is, in other words, Rav Meir Mazuz has a shita that he changes whatever he thinks is wrong al pi dikduk, right? Shvanach, dikduk. It's not so simple. We were very, very makbid based on the Gemara in Masechet Psachim. Le'olam yedaber adam b'lashon nikiya. Right, that's the first few dapim in Psachim, and they were very particular about that. And different places, for example, is written by Modim. Hamachazir shechinato litzion. That's the pride dikduk. Hamachazir shechin. In Morocco, they felt that saying hamachazir and saying something that sounds like chazir is not proper. So they said hamachzir. Wrong al pi dikduk. Doesn't matter. That's what they did. In Yir'u Enenu, the right dikduk is hamolech bichvodo el chai vekayam. Hamolech. He's going to be molech bichvodo. Nevertheless, in Morocco, they said hamelech bichvodo. The word hamelech bichvodo is wrong dikduk, because they didn't want to mention the name of the molech of the avodah zarah. Hamolech bichvodo el chai vekayam. So they said melech. There was dikdukim like that because of leshonot. So each thing has it could very well be that it has sources to it. So you have these wise guys that come along and they say, no, the dikduk is this, the dikduk is that. We weren't born yesterday. I remember one of my years by the Megillat Esther. One of the students from Kisei Rachamim say Umordochai, or he was something like that. That's how you have to say it. Umordechai. I don't know. My name is Mordechai. I grew up always Mordechai. All of a sudden you go. When I learn dikduk properly, I'll be miyashiv to you. But so quickly to like wipe off everything. We have to give a little bit of. This is where we evoke the principle of hotza'at la'az al divrei rishonim. That we have to have kavod. So it's a sensitive subject because you don't know where certain things just crept in or certain things are bidafka. For example, by Tfilat Shacharit of Shabbat, we say zecher lema'aseh bereshit. We know we say that. Other things could be mistakes. Each thing has to be examined under a microscope. What was yes, what was no. But don't be quick to judge and to try to change and take your pen and think that you're the first one who ever thought about this. We never end up right that way. We always end up regretting it. We always have to have kavod towards Rabbotenu, and that is the lesson. Okay, so here is the presentation. I see the clock hits midnight by you guys, and you're gonna, and before you turn into a werewolf, you better go to sleep. That is the Sikum Advarim. Chazak u'baruch.